Back in the spring of 2019, the MBUK office got an email from the Grindrod, Berg and Bush race in South Africa offering us a place in their event. When the email got spread around the office, I put my hand up straight away because I quite like a little adventure, going somewhere I've never been before, and while I'm not the world's best bicycle racer, I do quite enjoy it from time to time.
Got pancakes, got all sorts. This is awesome.
I didn't know much about the race initially, other than the few details I got in the initial email, but it was called the Descent version of the race, so I thought, well, that's got to be good. So I got myself and I signed up my friend Nick to come along as well. So it turns out that the Berg and Bush is a cross-country marathon race. So undeterred, we decided that I definitely needed to lose a bit of timber and get a little bit stronger, because if you're going to race, you've got to try as hard as you can.
I am in the Drakensberg Mountains in South Africa, which is a rather beautiful place, and that is my friend Nick.
Hello.
He is considerably stronger than me uphill, which is handy because we're doing a 3-day marathon. The day one, which is in about half an hour's time, is 96 kilometers, which is the second longest mountain bike ride I've ever done. So wish me luck.
The race takes in around 200 kilometers of riding from the Drakensberg Mountains down to the Tugela River, which is situated at the foothills of the Drakensberg. So Berg and Bush actually put on 3 different events within effectively a week. So there's a 3-day descent, which has the first day, which is a point-to-point, and then 2 days centered around the M70 camp, which is kind of where they're based. They also have the Great Midweek, which is another 3-day event doing very similar racing. And they also have a 2-day event the following weekend, which is a little bit shorter and a little bit more family orientated. The race is actually mostly a pairs race. You can do it on your own, but the vast majority of entrants do it as a pair. You have to stay within, I believe, 2 minutes of each other throughout the race to get a fair time. Because of the scale of the event, the riders are seeded for the start. This is because if you have too many people heading into the same tracks at the same time, you get lots of bottlenecks. So if you have South African racing points, you get seeded earlier the more points you have, which means less traffic and a projected faster finishing time. Myself and Nick didn't have any South African points, so understandably we were in the final wave. Being a pairs race and the result being based on both of our times when we crossed the line, tactics were pretty important. Myself and Nick have ridden together a lot, but we're quite different riders in some ways. I'm more experienced when it comes to descending and quite happily on more technical terrain, I guess, whereas Nick's very strong and a very good climber. So we decided that our tactics would be thus. On the climbs, Nick would sit in front and kind of tow me up because it's kind of easier to follow a wheel than it is to set a pace on the front. Nick's also very good at judging pace and effort, so we knew that he would be able to make sure that we got to the top the most efficient and fast way possible without kind of killing us along the way. On the way back down, if needed, I could jump in front, show him a few lines and make sure we got through the more technical stuff nice and safe.
You guys are here in 3, 2, 1, cheerio!
Day one started then right at the back, which is fine because the first few kilometers were along dirt roads and we basically started to make pretty good progress, overtaking quite a few people, it has to be said, which was fine, quite good fun. And then we started climbing up onto the top of a big plateau. And this started off as a fire road climb, but then quickly hit some single track. So pretty physical start to the race. But from there, we had a really long first main descent. It was mostly single track and it was absolutely beautiful. There's some good berms, there's some little bits of technical stuff, some little steeper bits, and a few jumps along the way too. However, because the whole race was strung out in front of us, there was a fair bit of traffic, so we didn't get to go full blast. Which again, probably not a bad thing because we're racing bikes we weren't particularly used to and obviously in a completely new place and a little bit excited. So I think having that traffic in front of us just helped us calm down and make sure we didn't go off too hot and make any little mistakes. The rest of the day after this main descent consisted of smaller climbs, smaller descents, quite a bit of dirt road, real fast, but also lots of single track too. Super fun, flowy single track, which we both really enjoyed. In total, it was just over 91 kilometers, so it was a fair old distance. In fact, it was the second longest day's mountain biking I've ever done after another race, which I did a few years ago. We'll put a link in the description because that was a fat bike race in Lapland. Totally different to an XC race in Africa.
How's it going? I'm all good on water, thank you. just grab little bits and pieces. So we're going to stop for about 2 seconds and as quick as possible crack on.
One of the really nice touches of the race is that along the way, at every 20 to 30 kilometres would be a feed station. This meant that we didn't have to carry too much with us when we're racing. A couple of bottles on the bike, a bar or two in the pockets, along with our tools, tubes and pumps. The feed stations were all set up by little community groups. It might have been a school or a church or something like this, and each one was different. They had a very festival atmosphere. It was really cool and really helped get us through the race.
15k left. Oh, we're smashing it.
While seeding for day 1 was based on previous South African cross-country races, seedings for days 2 and 3 was based on your times in the preceding days. And fortunately, myself and Nick were able to make pretty good progress through days 1 and into day 2 and day 3. So while in day 1 we started in the 9th wave, by day 2 we'd already jumped up to the 3rd wave, which is pretty cool because the pace was obviously quite a lot faster on day 2. This made the 64 kilometres of racing a little bit more exciting almost. There was less bottlenecks, there was much higher paces, and when we're on the road sections there was much more chance to ride in groups to make sure that we're getting the drafting potential like you see on road bike races. When it came to the single track we were able to go a little bit faster with less interruptions to our flow.
That was day 2 done and dusted. Dusty. 65-ish K in 3 hours and 2 minutes. 3 hours, 2 minutes, 65K. I think that's a fair old smash fest. We're up on Sjopenkop mountain. I probably pronounced that wrong, so I'm sorry any South Africans. It's quite historically significant because of the Boer War. We're going to ride up this tomorrow in the race, but they've just done a mass start hill climb for the men and the women. It's pretty cool.
It's about 5:15. Just got up and up early because the race starts at 6:30. And we're in the 2nd wave at 6:37, so actually not that long. Starts real early, just kind of sensible because it gets pretty hot during the days. It makes sense, but geez, it's quite hard to get out of bed this early.
By the time we got to day 3, we started off in the 2nd wave. And again, this was another quite noticeable step up in overall pace. And it was definitely proper XC racing at that point and really, really exciting. The dust clouds from all these bikes in front of us was pretty hard on the old throat, but it definitely added to the experience with the sun coming up, helicopters flying around filming the event, and this huge peloton of riders all racing out from the start village. It was a really cool experience. The Speenkop climb itself was about 400 metres vertical height gain, so I have to admit I was pretty tired by this point. We'd been racing as hard as we could for those 2 previous days, which were both fairly long themselves. So I was definitely feeling it in the legs. After a few kilometres we joined onto the back of a big group of maybe 30 riders, and we sat there for a bit, soaking up a bit of the speed, and then Nick just popped into the middle of the road and just started disappearing up past this whole group of riders. I'm getting pretty angry because my legs are already tired. I'm like, I've still got 40 odd K to go, so I don't want to blow up too early. I was thinking, what is Nick doing? What Nick was doing was tactically incredibly astute, because by the time we got basically to the front of the group, we turned left into a single track climb. It took me a minute to realise, but Nick had just pulled off an incredible bit of tactics, because instead of being stuck behind a group of 30 people on a single track climb, we were basically at the front, able to set our own pace with no one able really to overtake us. I was feeling pretty tired, Nick was feeling a bit fresher, and I really needed to eat something just to get me to the end of the race. So Nick was able to go up the hill ahead of me to a feed stop around 2/3 of the way up. As I dragged myself up past this feed station, Nick very quickly handed me a banana and a glass of Coke. I necked it back and started riding again while he went back to go and get himself fed. By the time he'd eaten and I'd got to the top of the hill, he met me just at the brow and we went straight into the descent without stopping. We finished racing down this long single track descent, and then we hit the last bit of flat for about 1.5 kilometres. And that last 1.5 K was some of the hardest we raced. We went absolutely flat out. We got through the end, had the obligatory high fives and congratulations to each other because we just finished, a really cool race. Specialized very kindly provided us the bikes for this race. I had a Specialized Epic, the full suspension version, which is obviously a very marathon XC orientated bike, and it has this brain rear suspension, which automatically locks it out when it's not really needed. I was happy on this because I felt that the more XC version of the Epic would help me up the hills where I needed the help, and on the descents it wouldn't hold me back too much.
Carbon frame, carbon wheels, skinny tyres, all nice and fast, level TL brakes, no dropper, cause racing.
Nick was riding an Epic Evo. Now this comes with a longer travel fork, it comes with a chunkier front tyre, better brakes and a dropper post. So with Nick's strength being on the climbs, he didn't need too much help on that, whereas on the descending, having that little bit of extra confidence certainly helped things along. Despite racing pretty hard for a couple of 100 kilometres, we had no issues with the bikes. Obviously the chains were being lubed at the feed stations, and after each day we were able to wash our bikes at the massive bike wash stands that they had set up, but we had no chain breakages, no punctures, no other issues. So it was really good to be able to do a whole set of racing on these actually quite reliable bikes. Despite there being over 1,000 people involved in the race, either racing or supporting, the organisation was actually really impressive. They provided lunches and dinners as well as breakfast, and at no point did we ever have to queue for more than a few minutes for food. Berg & Bush offer a range of accommodation packages if you are going to go and do the race, but we were lucky to stay in what was called the Kingfisher camp. So these were very nice sort of bush-style tents with proper beds and mattresses in there. Very comfortable, they had electric sockets and everything. So in true BikeRadar style, I have my notes with some data for you. So day one was 91.4 kilometres with 1,054 metres of climbing, and this took us 4 hours and 38 minutes. Day two was 63.9 kilometres with 896 metres of climbing, and it took us 3 hours and 0 minutes. And then day three was 47.7 kilometres with 749 metres of climbing, which took us 2 hours and 14 minutes. Overall, that gives us roughly 21 km/h average speed, which I think is fairly respectable off-road. In our sub-veteran category, we came 15th out of 99 teams, and that put us 49th out of 353 teams overall. So don't forget, we did start right at the back, so spent a lot of time overtaking. Had we started in maybe the second wave, we would have got a slightly better position, but I don't think drastically, and we would never have been challenging the podium because there were some real fast boys at the race. Berg & Bush have already opened entries for the 2020 edition of the race, which happens between the 2nd and the 4th of October, and then you have the Great Midweek, which takes place a couple of days later, and the 2-day weekend race the weekend after that. They offer quite a range of fly-in and arrive yourself packages as well, and in my experience they were super helpful and it was incredibly well organised. So if you are looking for a bit of an adventure, go and race a marathon somewhere a little bit different, and you want to do something with a friend, I would really recommend it. Me and Nick had an incredible time down there. So you can find a bit more information in a link in the description of this video, or head to bergandbush.co.za. I think racing bikes is a great way to go and see different parts of the world that you might not otherwise have gone to. I also think that pairs up marathon racing is a whole lot of fun. Let me know in the comments what you think about races like this, and if there's any races you think I should go and try. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get notifications of all of our new videos on BikeRadar.